Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Friday's edition of the show. On the warning advisory chart here, we've got some winter storm warnings out for this evening, ending about midnight here for the northern southeast coast, mostly Haines on up the Klondike Highway there, Skagway. Seeing some more snow, blowing snow tonight. That's starting to mix in with rain around the Juneau area, but those northerly winds keeping the cold air in, slowly retreating back to the north later on this evening, and should be mostly rain all the way up into White Pass in that area, although it'll take a little longer to get up all the way up into that area. Otherwise, winter or snow advisories out for the Copper River Basin. Most areas seeing another 4 to 8 inches of snow tonight, mostly in the upslope areas away from Gulkana, although they're seeing some pretty good snow this afternoon. Visibility's down to 1 to 2 miles in light snow at 4 o'clock. And fog, also a snow advisory for the Kenai Peninsula, or winter weather advisory due to snow along the western Kenai Peninsula, right on up into the Anchorage area for tonight and into early Saturday at least. Looking for that 4 to 8 inches on average of snow. Some areas seeing more, other areas seeing less. So the snowfall is going to be quite varied and variable here across all of south central Alaska, as well as the Copper River Basin, with the heaviest precipitation amounts, of course, along the North Gulf Coast and on up into Prince William Sound. And for the satellite yesterday showed one system moving through the panhandle there, and a low tracking up like that. It's had some snow at times in the northern Susitna, or the southern Susitna Valley, northern Cook Inlet, then some breaks behind that. Cold air coming southward, covering all of the Bering Sea. Another system dropping in from the northwest there, coming across Wrangel Island throughout the daytime and into the afternoon, and taking a turn to the south here with the next system down in this area, developing quite nicely, as you can see, moving northeastward, bringing a lot of wind, rain, and snow up to the southeast coast, with most of the snow occurring back here to the west, where it collides with the Arctic air sweeping down from the north and northwest, and actually just north to south flow out here over the Bering Sea from the Chukchi Sea, with one disturbance here dropping southward and another one now showing up around Wrangel Island. And a lot of low clouds, areas of flurries, fog, and gusty winds, 30 to 50 miles an hour occurring from the Chukchi Sea right through the Bering Strait, across St. Lawrence Island, down across the Pribilofs, St. George, seeing gusts around 50 miles an hour, and then that's sweeping south-southeastward across the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula with pretty gusty winds as high as 60 to 65 miles an hour in gusts this morning there over the Unalaska area. Pretty gusty winds here across the Alaska Peninsula, and much colder temperatures, single numbers this afternoon up along the north coast there, milder out toward the Cold Bay Falls Pass area, but still below freezing there at Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Lighter wind conditions here in the central Aleutians, and then we have gale force to possibly even some storm force winds going on in advance of this front here. As it approaches the southeast coast, seeing gusts of 50 miles an hour or more occurring down over the Annette, Ketchikan area and along the coast this afternoon. Arctic front right through here, of course, along and north of that is where all the snow is occurring, and back to the west in the easterly flow on the north side of this low that's tracking north and then may pull back to the northwest a little bit. Offshore flow Again, the cold air all the way down to the Aleutians and beyond. And then these disturbances weakening as they come into the Chukchi Sea and then drop southward, but keeping the clouds, areas of light snow, and lower flying conditions in here over the Bering Sea areas. For tonight, this low pulls back to the northwest to Resurrection Bay, we'll call it. So cold air, snow continues over the south central areas here with mixed rain and snow. Wedge of warm air that has already pushed up to the North Gulf Coast will pull back to the west and northwest to a certain extent. So rain and snow are just flat out rain along the coastal areas. Definitely rain, heavy at times, and gusty winds tonight for the Panhandle with that front right up along the coastline, and then mixed precipitation here to the north. But that'll be mostly up into Canada by sometime after midnight. Fair skies out here, breezy conditions with cold temperatures generally below zero from northern Bristol Bay, and then well below zero up across the Brooks Range in the North Slope. And then out over the open water, that's where the clouds and light snow will be, along with the very gusty winds. Still pretty windy, areas of blowing snow possible along the Alaska Peninsula here. But high pressure, storm free out here over the western and central Bering Sea with just some variable clouds out there, and a disturbance clipping the Arctic coast there with some flurry conditions. Winds will be on the light side. And you can see weak high pressure builds in over the area tomorrow with still this trough through the central Bering Sea or from the Bering Strait southward to near the Pribilofs. That's just a focus for some lower clouds, fog, and some areas of light snow or flurries, really from almost reaching the Dutch Harbor area. That'll extend back all the way up into the Arctic there. Now the low beginning to edge its way a little bit to the east here, quite a gradient along the Alaska Range and into the inlet, so there'll be some pretty gusty winds through the passes of both the western and northern Alaska Range. Looks like that Arctic boundary will pull up somewhere to the eastern Alaska Range, so some kind of mixed precipitation occurring with the rain along the coast, and then possible areas of freezing rain over the Wrangell Mountains or the southeast portions of the Copper River Basin. Another front brings more wind and rain, more gale force winds and rain heavy at times back into the Panhandle. And some of this snow, lighter amounts, just flurries up toward Eagle, heavier amounts down toward Northway and Nabezna, and of course the snow advisories going on for the Susitna Valley, and that may end up including the Kenai Peninsula here once this colder air begins to pull back to the east and southeast. And the outlook for Sunday, very slow eastward progression of this low, so that's going to keep the precipitation going, and actually the colder air coming, or snowfall levels will be back down to sea level here even along the coastal areas, so some pretty numerous snow showers could be on the moderate to heavy side from Yakutat or even Elfin Cove all the way back into Prince William Sound. It'll still be a continuous fall of snow. Still looks like a pretty snowy day for Sunday there over the eastern southeast interior, with those flurries still extending up across the 40-mile country and on up toward Eagle. And then high pressure, cold temperatures well below zero. Look for minus teens and 20s for the daytime highs here over the north central interior, and that cold air all the way back down into Bristol Bay. And this Arctic front southeast of Kodiak Island, actually another surge of even colder air will be sweeping in on those northwest winds there across Kodiak Island on up into the southern Cook Inlet, Barren Island. So definitely heavy freezing spray for these areas marine-wise, and lots of snow showers now this front all the way down to the south. So snow will fall to sea level as far south as Dixon Entrance by midday Sunday and into the afternoon, but the heavier stuff will be up to the north. Otherwise just scattered showers, and no change out here over the Bering Sea except lighter winds. You can see much less gradient out here now, but still some low stuff and flurries here right along the coast. No change really out to the west. A few flurries possible over the western Aleutians. And the Arctic coast, a couple of weak disturbances bringing a few skiffs of snow to the east side, otherwise nothing significant at all. And for temperatures this afternoon, the warm spot in the state was there at Ketchikan, Klawock with 45 degrees. Ketchikan had 44, but they had southeast winds up to about 50 miles an hour with rain heavy at times. 44 over at Sitka with rain, 41 in Wrangell, 34 in Juneau. North winds keeping the temperature at 18 at Skagway. Yakutat was missing while Cordova was up to 42 degrees. Contrast that with 19 with 50-mile-an-hour northerlies there at Seward. 23 Valdez and some snow, 18 in Anchorage. Heavier snow occurring half mile in moderate snow down at Homer, about the same thing at Kenai, 21 at Talkeetna, and a -9 Denali. Otherwise, temperatures generally below zero here along and north of the mountains, except at Delta Junction, where those east winds are up to 40 to 45 miles an hour. They're about 4 above. Otherwise, Eagle at -10, Fort Yukon 15 below, -21 at Bettles, Cold Spot 26 below zero at 4 p.m. at Umiat, -4 at Barrow, a little above zero here at Kotzebue and Kivlena, and 16 at Shishmaref, but -6 over at Ambler. Actually, that's Hoosley. Ambler is -17. Single numbers along the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula there. -2 Holy Cross, -5 over at McGrath, 5 above there at Cape Newenham and Tooksuk Bay, as well as Dillingham, 3 degrees. King Salmon, and then up to 24 at Cold Bay, 27 on Alaska. Mid-30s out over the Aleutians. Lows tonight will be running generally well below zero in the -30s to even near -40 there over the northwest part of the state. And North Slope 20 to 30 below zero readings, still the 0 degree isotherm right along the coast here, and then down to say Pilot Point, so below zero to the north there. And then with the milder air, clouds and snow, teens and 20s here. Quite a variation though over the Copper River Basin depending on your elevation. And then mid-40s over the southern southeast coast. Some areas of the Aleutians could drop into the lower 20s like the Pribilofs. For the highs tomorrow, you can see really contrasted here along the mountains with the 20s to the south, well below zero up to the north, and pretty chilly out here to the west, but a marked warming as you get out toward the coastline into the the lower 20s to near 30 over the Pribilofs. For the Panhandle, 40s, lower to mid 40s, some areas a little milder to the south, otherwise no change out over the Aleutians. And for flying weather, a swath of VFR here from the North Slope down through the western interior, then lower stuff right up along the coastline with the Yukon Delta coast most susceptible to seeing some marginal conditions. Of course, Nunivak Island, and that'll slip right on down or continue to be seen along the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Back up through the Bering Strait, occasional IFR possible tomorrow, mostly on the central and western Arctic coast, and then IFR, of course, Tanana Valley, White Mountains, right down along the Alaska Range. Could be maybe marginal at times over eastern Cook Inlet there and the western Kenai Peninsula up into the Matanuska Valley. Otherwise, expect IFR all the way down to Dixon Entrance. For the passes, Anatuvik occasionally or will be VFR the entire day tomorrow, as well as will be Adigan VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill IFR at times. Expect IFR also for rainy and windy. No IFR for Isabel and Mentasta. All of those Alaska Range passes will be IFR tomorrow. Portage IFR to low IFR, and Chilkoot and White same thing, IFR or even lower. For the freezing levels here, you can see cold air continues southward, but a little bit of a recovery back here over the Aleutians, but not much. And the main gradient here over the southeast coast, so those freezing levels running from 2 to 6,000 feet. And then on Sunday or Saturday night and Sunday, this colder air will slide off and bring the snow levels back down in those areas on Saturday night and Sunday. For the icing threats, couple of systems rolling through, so moderate rime icing possible there in the Panhandle back to the west along the North Gulf Coast and back into the western Alaska Range areas, but then that mostly in the morning hours, and that should end here over the central and southern areas once that first front pushes through the area. And then for the upper level winds, upper low pressure right just near the Kenai Peninsula or the Barren Islands gradually will begin to pull off to the east or northeast. Northerly jet continues with those strong surface winds at least tonight into midday tomorrow here over the eastern Bering Sea. Then that'll begin to weaken and also move off to the east with a higher pressure out here to the west. And then that strong southwest jet right into the central and southern southeast coast. And again on Sunday, that will push a little farther to the south and take the main storms into the south. And that'll allow this colder air to finally sweep back in over the area. For 9,000 feet southeast, pretty strong here, 30 to 50 or even 60 knots for the eastern Gulf of Alaska and Panhandle. Easterlies to northeast, 35 to 45, as high as 50 knots along the southwest coast. Taking a turn to the southeast here over the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 30 knot winds, strongest on the east side of the Arctic coast. And those will be down to about 5 knots, so pretty light winds for the western coast tomorrow. And of course, under the low pressure center at 3,000 feet, pretty light variable winds, southeast 20 to 25. Otherwise, northwest about the same there for Kodiak Island. Much stronger, though, over the Alaska Peninsula than high pressure winds dropping off over the Aleutians. And then the southeast winds, 30 to 55 knots there along the southeast coast. Turbulence-wise, looks something like this. Moderate chop just about everywhere here in the turquoise shaded areas, especially for smaller aircraft. North Slope Arctic coast, smooth. And then anything severe looks like at this point it'll be down to the south of the coast there, or the Panhandle. And after hangar flying, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest this evening is Rex Gray. Welcome back to Hangar Flying, Rex.
Thank you.
Last time you were on the show, we talked about your trip up to Alaska in the J3 and your experience with flying low over the Fraser River. So let's fast forward a little bit, and now you're in Alaska. Let's talk about some of the commercial aviation jobs that you've had in Alaska when you come up here.
Yeah, well, I come up to Alaska for a flying job. You know, I was hoping that I would find some flying up here. And at that time, you know, everybody was excited because the rumor was there were C-130 pilots in Fairbanks making $100 a day. I thought, wow, C-130 guys making $100 a day flying on a pipeline, that was a big deal. And so I was pretty excited. So, of course, I didn't have any C-130 time. But I ended up at a little flight school because I was flight instructing in California, had a lot of flight instructing experience, worked at a big 141 school, and taught a lot of people to fly. So I ended up at Phillips Field, which was a little tiny airport off the end of the runway there in Fairbanks, and instructed there. And pipeline was in its heyday, so we had lots of students. And then I was going to go back to California in the winter, and somebody come over and offered me a job flying a Cherokee 6 for one of the air taxis. So I ended up doing air taxi flying for the pipeline and so forth over the years, and then graduated to a DC-6, graduated to a Wien jet, graduated to an Alaska Airlines jet, and now retired and graduating to a B-17.
Oh, so you're going to get to fly for the Collings Foundation?
No, EAA. I'm going to
okay.
be flying the EAA Aluminum Overcast.
Oh, wow.
On the summer tours.
Oh,
It's a pilot's version of running away and joining the circus.
Yeah, no, that would be really exciting. So some of the, so you've flown 737 for how many years now, between Wien and Alaska?
It would have been 28 years at Alaska in the 737, and at Wien I flew the 727 for 3 years.
And you just recently retired.
Just recently retired, and now I'll be flying my Champ. You know, I got a 1946 Champ, and the goal is to keep that thing running until its 100th birthday and run around the patch on its 100th birthday in 2046. I won't let you do the math, but you can guess.
Oh, that's good. Well, let's talk about flight instructing and safety, since that's part of our mission, Safety
Sure.
Foundation. I always ask everybody, what are 3 things that you would carry in your airplane for survival? And you know, in addition, or even something that's important even with your survival kit, but something that stands out in your mind as really, I've got to have those 3 things.
Well, when I go somewhere, I have my survival gear and all that stuff, and I try and inventory it at the beginning of every year because sometimes it gets robbed a little bit, so it's very important to keep it inventoried. But I like to have things in my pocket, and there's a couple things I carry in my pocket. One of them is some sort of knife or Leatherman, one of those 2 items. And then the other one is some sort of light. And I've learned this from my son, who flies for the Alaska Air National Guard, the Pavehawk, rescuing people. And he says, if you have a light, they can see you, you know. So I carry some sort of light.
Any particular light?
Well, he says white lights are pretty tough at night. So he would, you know, something with a red lens if you can get that. And then the other thing I I just started carrying a couple of years ago. I carry all the time now, whether I'm in the airplane or somewhere else in, you know, hiking or on a boat or something. And it's a little Ziploc bag with cotton balls rubbed in Vaseline and a flint. You get a little flint stick, cotton balls, and you can light a fire anywhere and any condition. You know, if you can get your fingers to work, if your fingers aren't too cold to work, you can do that. It doesn't take up much space. You know, the little flint just slips right into the little coin pocket in my Levi's, cotton balls in a Ziploc bag. I even have some when I'm hiking I put on a chain around my neck or lanyard around my neck. Those three things, I figure, light, I can get rescued. Cotton balls, I can get a fire started and get warm. The knife, I can do a little bit of work if I need to.
Oh, good. We have just about a minute left. Tell me one thing that you would advise pilots that they could do, whether it's training or whatever proficiency, to make them safer, to help make them safer. Something that maybe you see repetitively in pilots that you think they can work on to be a safer pilot.
Get good recurrent dual. I can't stress that enough. We've had a bad season this year. We had a bad season last year. And you know, I'm not saying what the accidents were caused from or anything, but I think if you go out and find a flight instructor that will really put you through the paces, really train you and check you, I think can do more than anything.
That's great advice, and not just your friend who happens to...
Not just your friend,
Yeah.
not the cheapest guy, not somebody that's going to sign you off, but somebody that's going to really look at you. You know, when you go to the doctor, you don't go looking for the cheapest doctor. You
Right.
go looking for somebody that's going to look at you.
That's-
And this is a new stage of my life because now I've been checked frequently in my job. Now I'm retired, and now I'm going to have to go find that person.
That's great advice, and I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you very much for joining us on Hangar Flying. And folks, fly safe out there, and have a good evening.
Welcome back. Look for gale force winds high as 40 knots here, especially along the central and south coast, and small craft advisories all the way up to the north. Southerlies to southeasterlies 20 to 30, in some cases even gusts to 35 knots, but lighter up toward Lincoln Glacier Bay. And then those winds should at least come up to 25 knots from the south over those northern areas on Sunday. Good southwest winds here, 25 to 35 knots all along the coast, except the far northern area, 20 knots, and then 20 to 25 knots southwesterlies over the inside waters. And for Cook Inlet, kind of a variation north of the Forelands, northeast at about 10. Winds are light and variable with these southwesterlies across the Gulf to west, 30 to 35 knots, back in toward the Barren Islands. Gales continue Kodiak Island, and for Sunday, should look something like this. Northwesterlies 30 to 35 across Kodiak Island. Heavy freezing spray as even colder air pulls into these areas. And the Barren Islands especially could even see storm force winds here with gales for the western northwest coast, and then the Prince William Sound area northeast 20, same thing for Cook Inlet. For Bristol Bay, northwest gales tomorrow. Actually, the entire peninsula here under a gale warning with heavy freezing spray on both sides. And then for Sunday, winds coming down, still carry some freezing spray, mostly here southwest of Kodiak Island. Starting out with gales coming down to 30 and then probably down to 20 knots by evening, otherwise northwest 15. For the Aleutians, north to northwest, 30 knots tomorrow on average, and then dropping back to 20 knots all the way out to the western areas. For Sunday, lighter winds yet, northeast to east at about 10 to 15 knots, so pretty light wind day coming up here for the Fox Islands. Even the Adak-Atka area looking pretty good, 15 to 20 knot winds all the way out to Attu. For the Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, all the way down the coastline, gale force winds continue for another day with even 30 knot winds for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs. For Sunday, look for winds to really come down here over the northern Bering Sea, higher pressure moving in just northwest at 10, and the winds coming down to 15 knots for the Pribilofs. So the freezing spray will end out in these areas, but continue here along the southwest coast, especially in the channeled areas. You'll see gusts early in the day, still up around gale force, and then everything diminishing toward the late afternoon and evening. Winds coming down for St. Lawrence Island down to 20 knots. And for the Arctic coast, tomorrow looking westerly at about 10 to 15 knots there, north 10 knots. Pretty light winds tomorrow there, even on the west side here, just 15. Small craft advisories. Yeah, still some open water areas here, so small craft advisories from Cape Lisburne down across the Chukchi Sea. And for Sunday, lighter winds down to 20 knots here in these areas, and northwest about 10 to 15 on the central coast, and then gradually increasing to 20 to maybe as high as 25 knots over toward Kaktovik to Demarcation Point. And for tonight again, winter weather advisory for the Kenai Peninsula, especially the western Kenai Peninsula up into the Anchorage area for 4 to 8 inches of snow. And again, snowfall amounts will be quite variable here across south central Alaska, and also quite varied as far as precipitation type goes, with rain along the coast. Some of that into western Prince William Sound could change over to rain at Whittier. Probably not at Seward, and then definitely rain, gusty winds, gusts of 50 miles an hour ahead of this front tonight. And then that winter storm warning should end over these northern areas by midnight. Fair, below zero, some areas still breezy, like up around Indian Mountain, resulting in lower wind chills. And then the gusty winds and flurries out here continuing to push across the Nikolsky to Sand Point area. And for tomorrow, that looks like snow continuing. Look for some gusty winds through the passes of the Alaska Range. More heavy wind and rain with gale force winds until this front moves through tomorrow afternoon over the Panhandle. Snow up over the eastern interior, but staying fair, mostly clear and cold out to the west as well as the north. And for Sunday, that low sliding off a little bit here, so freezing levels drop to sea level. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.